great pleasure to spend some time with you today, talk about this exciting topic. I have a lot of fun tech and brain things to unpack with you, but I find it's important to start a talk like this with what I would say is a hard view of our times. So I have come to believe that we are in the midst, our species is in the midst of a crisis. And I'm not talking about the external one that we inflicted upon our planet. I'm talking about an internal one, a crisis of our minds, or what I refer to as a cognition crisis. Because when it comes to our attention, our perception, our memory, reasoning and decision making, our imagination and creativity, emotional regulation, our capacity to feel empathy, we are tragically lacking. There have been times throughout history where societies have prioritized the enhancing of the human mind. I would say, unfortunately, now is just not one of those times. And we're paying a great price for this. We know that over 500 million people around the planet are suffering the debilitating effects of impaired cognition. And this burden is growing, notably dementia in our seniors and mood and attention disorders in our youth. I refer to this as a cognition crisis and not the better, more well-known mental health crisis because this extends beyond the clinical domain to affect all of us. Our limitations in long-term thinking, critical and analytical decision-making, and empathic concern are plain to see just by reading the news every day. And that is also getting worse. We'll come back and talk about that later. Enhancing human cognition needs to be positioned as a grand challenge and placed on par with the other pressing global priorities. Because if we can't manage to focus our attention in a sustained manner and make creative, wise, and future-oriented decisions that prioritize others over ourselves, we will never effectively address complex time-delayed crises like climate change, no matter how much information we acquire. We need to embrace this challenge and level up our minds. Today, the dominant paradigm is that there is a pill to cure our ailing minds. We haven't found it, but we will find it. Now, there is nothing wrong with this idea of using a molecule to enhance cognition, but this approach has just not served us well enough. While death and suffering from cancer, heart disease, and infectious disease have declined, the reverse trend has occurred for afflictions of the mind, dementia, anxiety, depression, and suicide. We need a new paradigm, and we need a new medicine. I believe that a solution exists by harnessing a core aspect of human growth and development: experience. For thousands of years, we humans have been creating and ritualizing experiences to enrich the quality of our lives. Music, art, dance, sports, story, and games. We've also intentionally designed experiences to support our mental health. So notably, a central tenet of the ancient and widespread practices of meditation is not just enlightenment, it's release of suffering from unhealthy states, grief, craving, clinging. We also now know that the experience drives our brain's plasticity. It changes it at every level, its structure, its chemistry, its function. Yet, despite this rich history and a strong scientific foundation in neuroplasticity, most people do not think about experiences as medicine, certainly not in the same way that they view pills. It has been marginalized as the alternative, not mainstream medicine. For the past 2 decades, I've been working to change this by showing that technology can deliver a very unique type of experience that has a great impact on improving cognition. I call this the closed-loop experience, where the environment that you are exposed to adapts in real time based upon your state in the moment. So let's break this down, because this is essentially what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the talk. So here is your brain interacting with a digitally delivered closed-loop experience. And so while you interact, data about your state in the moment is being captured by sensors, your stress, your emotions, your performance. This is delivered to a processor that then adaptively adjusts the environment that you're exposed to in a personalized manner. So sensations, challenges, and rewards delivered to you on a phone, a tablet, or in a virtual simulation. I want to note, it is the mechanics, the nature of the interaction that activates brain networks in a selective way, allowing us to precisely target these interventions. This is something that we have never, ever accomplished with a molecule alone. And it is the adaptive aspect of a closed-loop system that applies continuous pressure to the underlying neural networks to harness the brain's inherent plasticity to optimize its function over time. So you could think of this as the ultimate personal trainer that has complete access in every moment to you, to your data, to your performance, how you're changing, and then can immediately adjust challenges and rewards in a personalized way. My story with closed-loop games began 17 years ago at UCSF, the university that I work at, when I designed my first closed-loop video game and developed it with friends of mine that worked at LucasArts. Now, NeuroRacer was designed to challenge attention at a high level. It demands rapid responses in the setting of competing tasks and constant distraction. We used adaptive staircase algorithms as the engine to power the closed loop behind NeuroRacer. You could almost think of this as a primitive ancestor of modern-day AI. 5 years later, after multiple research studies, we published this in 2013 as the cover story of Nature. And we showed that healthy older adults who participated in this study, so they played NeuroRacer for 3 days a week, 1 hour in each session, just for 4 weeks, 12 hours of gameplay. They not only got better at the game, but they improved their attention and their working memory, the short-term memory for faces outside of the game. They retained their improved multitasking abilities 6 months later, and now we've shown 6 years later. And then by recording brain activity during gameplay, we showed the neural mechanisms of action, that it was the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of our brain, and its connections with the rest of the brain that changed in response to gameplay. Around this same time, in 2010, I started a company called Gazzaley to bring this idea into the work. And working with a fairly large team of game professionals that wanted to put their skills to making games beyond entertainment, and scientists, we developed a closed-loop game called Endeavor. Now, Endeavor is essentially the same game as NeuroRacer. It has the same closed-loop design, but we were able to add more art, story, music, better rewards, better challenges, better usability. In general, just a much better game experience, but the same actual principles that underlie the game that we studied that was published in the Nature paper. Over the years, dozens of research trials have been performed in diverse clinical populations to validate this game as a therapeutic tool and advance what we view as a new era of experiential medicine. Remember, experiential medicine has been around for thousands of years, but the delivery through technology and software gives us a unique opportunity. The main finding of the Nature paper has now been replicated dozens of times in different clinical populations that this game improves sustained attention abilities outside of gameplay. And this is populations as diverse as autism, multiple sclerosis, depression, even recently COVID fog. I want to highlight one particular study. I was not an author in the study. This was a study led by Scott Collins out of Duke. And it's quite a unique study, really of a first of its kind. So this was a phase 3 trial. It's a prospectively designed, multi-site, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial on 8 to 12-year-olds with ADHD. So basically putting this video game through the same methodology, the same rigorous methodology, the randomized control trial that every stimulant has gone through in its road towards approval. And the results show that 1 month of Endeavor RX significantly improved attention measures in these children relative to a control game. The next study showed that the behavioral improvements that these children experienced retained over the month after the game was withdrawn, and then showed additional benefits after it was reintroduced. And this effect occurred whether or not children were on stimulants, same effect. As you probably know, if you withdraw stimulants, those effects go away almost immediately. So this is a plasticity-based treatment that changes the brain and has these enduring effects. After 10 years, I'm proud to say, as you heard, that we now have the first ever approved video game by the FDA for a clinical treatment. It was quite a long journey to get here. No one had ever presented a video game to the FDA for approval. This is now a Class 2 medical device. It went through the rigorous de novo pathway in the FDA, and it is now prescribable. And what I can now tell you is that doctors in every state in the country have prescribed over 10,000 prescriptions for a video game as medicine to children. So it really is quite a shift in how we think about medicine, and really accomplishes our goals of taking it beyond the entertainment domain and telling our physicians and our families, our regulators, now our insurance companies, that they should think about this in every way that they think about Adderall as a medicine. Based upon 2 new studies, we've shown that adolescents who play this game show a 3-time improvement in their attention metrics compared to children, and adults show almost a 7-time improvement, as well as 2/3 of the participants in the study notice after 6 weeks changes in their functioning in their daily lives. And with these 2 new studies, we got 2 new approvals from the FDA, one for adolescents as an RX treatment, and then for adults as an over-the-counter treatment, actually making it the first over-the-counter digital treatment. So adults do not have to go to a physician to obtain this treatment. They could download it from any app store and treat themselves. Most recently, 2 studies done in Japan on children with ADHD in Japan showed significant improvements, and just very recently, the Japanese PMDA, perhaps the only regulatory agency more conservative than the US FDA, approved this as a digital treatment, the first of its kind for children in Japan and Taiwan. So we're very excited about that. That has not launched commercially yet, but that'll be happening later this year. As you may not know, in Japan, we don't treat children. They do not treat children with stimulants there. So this is really a great opportunity, and also, you know, as a scientist, to be able to show the benefits outside of a country. You know, what we know is that there's one brain. We have very similar brains around the world, but it's still really important to be able to show that the benefits are not specific for this country, and it's opening up an entire potential for global scaling of this type of treatment. All right. Back to the lab. In parallel, at UCSF, my lab turned into a research center that we call Neuroscape. And we developed a whole new series of labs to sort of essentially integrate technology with neuroscience to develop these novel therapeutics. You can see a view here of 4 of our labs. We now have 3 other labs that we've created. And we've been busy over the last 10 years. We've been building more closed-loop video games that are inspired by real-world experiences. It takes us around 2 years to build these games, bringing on as high as we are capable of art, music, and story. And each of them record different aspects of a player's performance to create these closed-loop experiences that are then delivered, often on tablets, but now in virtual settings. It then takes us another 2 years to do the deep dive research trials, these randomized controlled trials. And essentially anything that we think can change, we study in our trials. So if you're in one of our studies, you might have some of these, or even perhaps all of these, to see what are we capable of shifting by usually 4 to 6 weeks of gameplay. We still are a neuroscience center, still the core of what we do. So most of our participants have either MRI and or EEG to record brain activity to understand what is changing in their brain in response to these games so that we can iterate and build better interventions. But, which may be of interest to this audience, we've also developed a platform called Nexus that allows us to do large-scale, fully distributed remote trial. So every aspect of a research trial that's normally done in sort of a bricks and mortar setting are done remotely. So our recruitment, authentication, characterization, consenting, randomization, treatment, outcomes follow-up, all done without actually human-human contact, which allows us to have much larger numbers and much more diverse samples of research participants, hopefully taking that to a global scale soon. So now I just want to give you a quick overview of some of the benefits that we've shown over the last decade with closed-loop experiences delivered as video games. So the first, and one that we're very proud of, is MetaTrain. It takes principles of breath-focused, concentrated focused meditation and integrates them with our closed-loop design principles. After 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and 6 weeks in 3 clinical trials, MetaTrain has been shown to improve attention in children, young adults with adverse life events, and healthy seniors. And our latest data in older adults shows that it doesn't only improve attention, it improves the stress responsivity and lengthens telomeres, which is a cellular marker of aging. Our success with Metatrain led us to develop two other mindfulness games. One, Engage. Children, in our experience, just have difficulty finding their breaths. Many adults do as well. And so in Engage, a child plays first in a very busy environment, similar to a lot of the gameplay that they engage in. But then when they reach a high enough level, they get to engage, which means they close their eyes and they continue to collect these insects in this alien world just by hearing alone. As they get better, the game gradually makes it quieter and the target insects become less and less frequent. So literally within like a couple of days, you could get an 8-year-old just sitting there quietly meditating to these insect sounds. So really excited about this. Our first trial in school showed improvements in attention and reading fluency in children with learning challenges. We have another game called Compassion that we developed with a colleague of ours, Jack Cornfield, a real meditation and mindfulness thought leader, moving the focus of attention away from the breath to words of loving kindness, known as metta in its Buddhist tradition, to see if we could increase these capacities with a digital closed-loop approach. Here is Body Brain Trainer. In Body Brain Trainer, you have simultaneous cognitive and physical challenge, and the demands in both domains adapt based upon motion capture and real-time physiological data, in this case, heart rate. So it's really interesting. We're starting to weave multiple different closed loops together. And what we've shown in 2 papers is that this has benefits on both attention metrics and on physical fitness in younger and older, in children, this was done as an after-school study, and in older adults, that the benefits retain 1 year later. Here is Labyrinth. In Labyrinth, you search and collect items in a virtual world while the navigation challenges adapt in a closed-loop way based upon your efficiency of how effectively you locate them. Labyrinth VR has been shown to improve high-fidelity, long-term memory in older adults. That's something that we have just never accomplished before. It's not like a memory crutch. It's actually improving memory processing. We are now studying this in older adults with mild cognitive impairment as potentially a preventative for dementia. So that's something that we're really excited about. That study is around halfway done. Here is coherence. In coherence, you see, hear, and respond to stimuli, while the rhythmic challenges adapt based upon the accuracy and the precision of your responses. Coherence on a tablet version of this has now been shown in these publications here to improve short-term memory for faces in older adults and reading fluency in children. And we just completed a pilot of a virtual reality version, which you're seeing here, of coherence, in children as a treatment for dyslexia. So we know that language has a rhythmic feature to it. There is some data in the literature to suggest that children have more music exposure, might have lower incidence of dyslexia. So can we intervene with a VR immersive rhythm experience to improve dyslexia symptoms? Okay, advanced closed loop experiences really rely upon active, rapid processing of data and potentially visualization of data. This is one of our big visualization programs. It's called the Glass Brain. What you're looking at is my glass brain while I'm playing one of our games. And so it's an MRI image on the static structures, the purple around the outside. The gold fibers are the connectivity between different brain areas. And then we're using multiple real-time processing routines to show where activity is occurring and how it is communicating across the brain while I play one of these games. So Fourier transformation, artifact correction, source localization, multivariate Granger causality, all being done just in hundreds of milliseconds. There was actually a collaboration with NVIDIA back in the day, and it is a really exciting project that we are now starting to put into practice. I can assure you that watching your own brain watch itself is a surreal experience that I hope you all have, especially in a head-mounted display. So hopefully that is in your future. Couple of other things. How do we boost these effects, right? Well, one way we could boost these effects is to take more than performance data, which is what all the games that I showed you mostly rely on, and use neural data directly to drive the closed loop. We have one study showing that this is possible and that we get additional benefits. And what I already described, that we've done studies showing that heart rate data could contribute to the closed loop experience. Here's another series of studies that'll sound a bit like science fiction, but we've shown that stimulating the brain electrically with a current that you really can't feel during gameplay accelerates learning curve over that period of time. Now we're looking to see whether these effects are enduring. We have a very cool study using 4 Hertz stimulation in older adults with mild cognitive impairment to stimulate their brain while they play MetaTrain, a meditation game, to see if we could boost the benefits, maybe have more enduring benefits. This is the frequency of stimulation that we showed was improved during the NeuroRacer study. So exciting. The next step is closed loop stimulation, where we're guiding the stimulation in real time based upon the neural signals that are being emitted. Right now we personalize it, but we do it beforehand. That is where we are heading for the next step. Okay. We are living in extraordinary times. They do not have to explain it to this audience that the landscape of opportunity in this new field of experiential medicine is vast, right? We have now the commercialization of virtual reality, augmented reality, wearable physiological devices, and motion capture. And now, while these technologies have largely been directed at communication and entertainment, there's just incredible potential for them to deliver a higher level of closed-loop experience to enhance cognition. And then there is the elephant in the room of AI, right? How does that figure into this? So this is where I'd like to pause the bus. And before talking about the opportunity, recognize that technology has already had a large burden in fundamental ways on our brain. Right? So we know that in addition to the clear and present danger of misinformation, there are multiple aspects of information technology that have overwhelmed our distracted minds. So first, rapid reward cycles just leads to an intolerance to boredom, and this challenges delayed gratification and sustained attention. Second, it's just too much information. I would say excessive information exposure is associated with a host of issues, from attention to stress to mood to anxiety to sleep. And then the simultaneous engagement in multiple streams of information, what we call multitasking, is linked to a whole host of concerns, not the least of which is safety and performance deficits. And then there is this phenomena of cognitive offloading. So as a kid in the 70s, I don't know if anyone here is old enough to relate to this, but I remember the controversy that ensued upon calculators entering classrooms. Does anyone remember that? And it was a big deal, right? Personally, I feel that no human being should ever have to do long division, ever. It's just like, we're just not built for it. So I think there is a lot of good that comes with cognitive offloading. But I understand the concern that removing abilities that we have and not practicing them and becoming experts in them has a cost. And this is discussed from the ubiquitous use of GPS, to-do list reminders, and what's known as the Google effect, the famous Google effect, if you've heard about this, which attributes poor memory to constant searching. There's some mixed data about that, but these are the concerns, that we offload these abilities, and then when we need them, they're not available to us. But I would say that all of this seems rather quaint when positioned next to this. We teach AGI to think, reason, and code so you don't have to. Now, I took this picture earlier this year at SFO. It was on a huge billboard. And I'm sure this audience has complex thoughts around offloading coding. But I would like to say, do we not want to think anymore? Is that where we're heading? Is that the goal? I mean, this felt very dystopian to me, at least. And, you know, it's this type of thing that makes me want to just go into a forest, sit in front of a tree, and spend a long period of time and really ponder, like, how did we wind up here? Why do we spend billions of dollars on augmenting artificial intelligence when human intelligence is in such shambles? And can technology, and AI specifically, elevate us as humans and not diminish us? So I want to share with you our first AI project that we started that's built around this concept and born while sitting in nature. So I'm a big fan of time spent in nature. Personally, it has been transformative to me as a constant source of restoration. And the literature supports that, right? That there are benefits of being in nature on well-being, from attention to stress, mood, anxiety, sleep, restoration from cognitive fatigue, both in clinical populations and healthy populations. And beginning in Japan with a practice known as Shinrin-yoku, also known as forest bathing, being in nature is actually prescribed as a medical treatment around the world, countries around the world. I actually talked to someone this week that was able to get a program that's reimbursed by insurance in Germany for people to go into nature as a treatment. So one, I think, sort of obvious question is, can technology-delivered nature experiences have similar benefits? And so this led to our 4-year project of building the nature journey. So in the Nature Journey study, you experience this really powerful nature and music 60-minute exploration, which was a collaboration between Louis Schwartzberg, a filmmaker who created Fantastic Fungi, and a musician named East Forest. While you're doing this, you're seated in our new multi-sensory immersion lab. So you see, hear, smell, and feel the nature stimuli over the hour. While this is happening, we record physiological data with our new 160 electrode multimodal biosensing system. I believe this is the most biometric data captured by a human being in a single experimental session. So everything from brain activity to facial movements to eye movements to heart rate to blood pressure, respiratory, electrodermal activity, even gut activity and cardiac contractility. So we pretty much brought on everything we can capture. And the main idea is that the complexity of the human condition and our states are just unlikely to be captured by a single modality. And so let's say we bring them all on. And so where do we go from here? So our first goal is to understand the progression from baseline states to stimulus-triggered emotional responses to longer-term influences on well-being. So you could read the whole list over there. It's sort of shocking, but this fundamental process that essentially defines how experiences change us is almost completely not understood. So with this level of detailed, comprehensive data collection with really powerful experiences, there's a good percentage of our participants that actually cry during this experience, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for powerful movement of emotions. We hope to discover how this transition works, and specifically how nature can facilitate improved health, wellness, and perhaps even increased empathy for nature. Why is this so critical? Well, I believe that our crisis of self and our crisis of our environment can only be remedied by deeply understanding ourselves in connection with nature. So can AI play a helpful role here? I think this would be another interesting narrative twist, like a video game to help with ADHD and AI to help us understand humans and nature. So I like these type of twists, and I think it is an interesting goal. So how do we go about that? We've now 50, actually just as of a couple days ago, we had 50 participants in our Nature Journey study. We're going for 100 participants between 8 and 80 years old. What's the next step? Well, it shouldn't be surprising to you, but the next step is to close the loop, to use multimodal biosensing to guide multisensory immersion. How do we do this? Well, the first path is to use machine learning to rapidly interpret this data and then feed reduced, likely text prompts to a large language model for stimulus generation. This is doable. It's hard. Trying to get this meaningful, interpretable data from all of these sensors is the biggest challenge here. It's actually easier on the generative AI side. So we are on this pathway already. But the more elegant and ambitious solution is to create a full closed-loop AI. What does that mean? It means that real-time multimodal physiology is directly prompting the generation of personalized multisensory environments. This then changes the source data and around the cycle flows. Right? So here emerges this dynamic dance between you and an AI that's designed to challenge and stimulate your brain to enhance cognition and prevent this slippery slide to unhealthy mental states. This is what we envision. Now, I can imagine the people in this audience might see a more accessible route to closed-loop AIs, right? Where we leverage web-based applications and couple it with consumer wearables, all open source, of course. So there's a lot of versions of this. This is the one that I'm pursuing, but there's definitely more accessible routes to this on the road to the full chamber here, the holodeck. So let me put some of this together and then bring us to a conclusion, take some questions. I see the future of experiential medicine involving multimodal biosensing integrated with art, music, story, game design with multisensory immersion, all woven together in AI-powered closed-loop experiences. That's where we're going. But there is the opportunity to see how this couples with molecular treatments. So I want to pause here since I spent the beginning of the talk bashing pills. And as I said, there's nothing conceptually wrong with this idea. The biggest problem is that we put a silo around this whole field. Matter of fact, we put a silo around every single drug and try to pretend that it's a magic bullet and can work in isolation. What's interesting is to think that if coupled with an experiential medicine, we could drop the doses, decrease the side effects, right? Side effects are really just other effects that are caused by lack of selectivity, and maybe get a bigger outcome than either experiential or molecular medicine separated. So we started this, and what I think is a really intriguing molecular solution for this that's well-suited is psychedelics. So you may be aware, but after decades of suppression of research on psychedelics, there's now an emerging research field and data showing the safety and efficacy of psychedelics like psilocybin, pictured here from mushrooms, to treat a broad range of conditions, notably PTSD, depression, and addiction, although others are being studied. But critically, there's a consensus among experts, whether it's a South American shaman or a researcher from Johns Hopkins or underground therapist in the Bay Area, that the outcomes, either whether they're positive or negative, are driven by the experiential elements of the treatment, what occurs before, during, and after, what's known in the field as set, setting, and integration. I would say that this means that psychedelics are most appropriately thought as molecularly initiated, but experiential medicine, creating a timely opportunity for us to bring them together to see how they can have better effects working as both molecular and experiential. And this is the basis of our research program at Neuroscape on psychedelics. Can we use tools like multimodal biosensing to understand the state of an individual when they're going through one of these treatments, which is largely makes what's happening to them inaccessible. They can't really even talk about it. Then, can we experiment with changing the environment that they're exposed to? And the next step, of course, would be to close the loop. The first time ever looking at closed-loop psychedelic treatments where we could guide someone more safely and effectively through a treatment to lead to better outcomes. This is the direction that we're heading. And this is a study that will be starting soon where we combine multimodal biosensing with multisensory immersion with psychedelic treatments. Anyone want to participate? We'll be well, we have a couple, one person. Okay, cool. Okay, so anyway, that will be coming soon to Neuroscape in San Francisco. So, to conclude, if we want to have a long, healthy future on this planet, I believe we need to address this cognition crisis now. And I can imagine no better path for AI than for it to enhance human intelligence. AI for HI, right? So we can do better, and we need to do better. Thank you so much for your attention. All right, I timed this well. I knew you'd have some questions, so we have 13 minutes on the clock, so that was my hope here. I didn't ramble on too long. So, any questions?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Sebastian. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. Do these video games generalize to other contexts?
Yeah, I mean, that's, the core of what all those publications are generalization, right? They're all about how do you transfer the benefits from the gameplay itself, which almost always improves, to skills and abilities and real-world behaviors outside of the game. And that's like the cornerstone of what you need to go to the FDA. Showing the FDA improvement in game performance would not be enough. We were able to show improvement on an objective measure of attention that's actually used in the diagnosis of ADHD compared to a placebo group playing an expectancy match game, and then also show improvements in the same behavioral measures that we see with other, treatments like stimulants. And so yes, the long answers, I could go through each of them. For example, MetaTrain showing you improvements. Here we have a eyes closed, breath-focused meditation leading to improved performance and attention with a rapidly paced visual attention task, improvements in stress responsivity, and I think probably the biggest transfer we ever seen, which is a lengthening of telomeres. So yeah, that's the, that's the holy grail. That's what we're always going for, is improvements outside of the game. Thanks. Great question.
Hey, Matt. I'm struck that there's with the final part of your presentation about this incredibly instrumented person going through this very heavyweight cycle with this multimodal generation, that there is an analog of that happening already at scale, which is, I believe, people using these AIs as therapists, but not monitored with no feedback. I'm curious if there is a less ambitious version of what you're talking about, where these systems might receive a smaller amount of feedback, generating text in talk situations that could be actually adopted much wider and much more easily.
Yeah, and I was sort of alluding to that, but I'm glad you're giving me the opportunity to unpack it a bit when I said I'm sure this audience sees more accessible versions of this. You know, as a neurologist, and sort of my mission is to create what's the highest level that we can do, you know, when someone has debilitating post-traumatic stress disorder, needs just a real, you know, shaking of the snow globe to reset themselves. And so that's where I'm motivated. And then I feel like if we understand that, we have a lot more information to make informed decisions about how to reduce it. But going from the bottom up is also completely appropriate. How do we use take our learnings from closed-loop systems just with text-based prompts and text-based responses to improve how AI can act as a therapist? I think that is completely reasonable. You know, then you could imagine just throwing on like some sleep monitoring or some heart, you know. So we're not working in that direction, but, you know, part of my inspiration to be here and talk with you is, you know, to give you my vision, but it's really the system. It's a methodology that I'm really trying to emphasize, by which this adaptive feedback loops really can change the brain in a powerful way. And I think that AI is really amenable to that. I would say the dangers are when the AI is sort of working on an information base that's scraped from the entire internet, you might not be getting the precision that you're looking for. And that's where I think the next stage are sort of like expert models that are really refined on, you know, even supervised, highly detailed data, refined data that allows it to act in a, you know, a much more targeted way. I think that's where we have to go.
Hi, I'm Kat. I think it's really cool what you're doing. Just on a personal note, I spent 3 months in the hospital because of an allergic reaction to ADHD medication. So hearing about these kind of advancements and alternatives is very awesome. I love hearing about what you're doing as well to make it very accessible. This might be a more long-term question than where you're at right now. Some of those require like a lot of technology and setup that not everyone might have access to. Is there a plan to partner with more doctors, or maybe even a long-term plan to have medical gaming centers? Do you have any ideas for that, or is that way out in the future?
No, it's a good question. You know, what the multimodal biosensing system and the immersion lab is in many ways the opposite of what I've been working on for a long time, which is to get science out into the world, right? Achille and our Endeavor game is a response to my desire to see science in people's homes, and people shouldn't have to always get in cars and go to clinics. So that's like a very particular study that's really designed to say we're at a point in technology where we can ask questions that have never really been fully addressed. And so returning to the lab to say, okay, with all these sensors, which are the most valuable? You know, most companies and groups and even labs that are using biosensors are sort of making relatively uninformed decisions about what's available to them, where their expertise lies. But we can say, where's the most information density here? So my hope is that we then get to reduce this in an informed way and figure out what is the best to go home with people. And, you know, I think it's just going to increase that individuals have wearable devices that are able to capture this information and be used in these closed-loop systems, from headsets to, you know, not even headsets, but even just using tablets. So I think that most of this will be accessible. You know, right, even today I was on a call with Saudi Arabia and talking with folks in India last week. You know, technology is pretty ubiquitous around the world. There are places, many places in the world where Wi-Fi exists that we can't even get teachers and doctors. So I think that there is a lot of accessibility. Whether or not we would have like high-level sensors of experiential treatments like I described here for people that are just intractable. No drug is working. I heard about a patient today that's just, you know, the family's just at the wit's end. Nothing, no drug, nothing is helping. I think that is a potential. So I don't know, but I think both could happen.
It's really great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for doing this work. I actually teared up a little bit during your presentation a couple of times. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 46, and I'm almost 52. I really wish that I had known about it when I was a kid and that I had something like this to help.
Thank you.
But more relevant to your topic, my father is actually going to be receiving virtual reality therapy from the VA hospital in San Francisco. And they'll be working on claustrophobia and PTSD, which is really, I mean, exciting sounds like the wrong word, but I'm excited. And I'm wondering if there is something that's out there today that I could use specifically for ADHD, and is there something that I could have for my child who's 17?
You know, this is a field that, it's shocking to me, is not like more scaled, both in the US and globally. I mean, there's lots of great data. The side effect profile is lower. It reduces a lot of the stigma associated with drugs. There's a lot of reasons why it should be much more prevalent. Not that I'm this glaring exception, which unfortunately is largely true. And there's a lot of reasons for that, a lot of reasons that I've learned. Like, it's hard to change paradigms. You know, the paradigm of a pill as medicine is so thick that it's hard to see outside of it. You know, I went to med school. That's like what we learned is medicine, like either cut it or you give a pill. And it takes a long time to change that. These institutions are very entrenched, very hard to move. Even right now, our battles with insurance companies. I can give you a little update that you just triggered in my mind is just a couple weeks ago, is that there are now CMS codes just released that activate in January that is for Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement for digital treatments for ADHD. So, you know, the company's been waiting for 5 years for this. 5 years. So much need, so much opportunity, so little side effects, no reimbursement. So this is happening. So the system's changing. And, you know, every week I talk to groups all over the world that are doing experiments like you just described with virtual reality and other new technologies. So it's still largely a research field. Unbelievably to me. You know, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I thought for sure by the time we hit this year, there would just be so many applications out there that it would be like, you know, as big or in the direction of pharmaceutical industry. That has not happened. But I'm still quite optimistic that it will. In terms of treatments, there's not actually many approved treatments. There's the Endeavor RX treatment and OTC for adults, which is over the counter. And there are some VR treatments for pain. But there are many that are just at the brink of, you know, getting through these approvals. So stand by. More help is coming.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Hi, my name is John. I may have missed it or may have walked in a few minutes late. Could you touch a little bit, have you had any success with children that are autistic or slightly on the spectrum, and maybe elaborate a little bit on your findings?
Yeah, we have done only one study that falls in the autism spectrum, a study of sensory processing disorder. And we had benefits. That paper's published. It was with Endeavor, the same game that is now approved for ADHD. But of note is that a large percentage of those children also had ADHD. And so the results are a little murky there. As you know, there's like tons of comorbidity. I mean, it's all woven together, right? So, you know, we improved attention ability in that cohort in that study. But I know of many groups that are interested in other aspects of autism and how it might be amenable to these types of treatments in terms of social interaction and facial expression recognition. I know a lot of work that's going on that right now. You know, so the concepts are the same. You know, my group, we can't study every condition, but there's definitely a lot of interest in autism. Another condition we have not studied is addiction. Again, interesting to use gameplay and even some reward cycles that could be rather addictive to treat addiction, but all of these are you know, being pursued now. So autism is one that I feel like we might put our sights to in the near future.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. How do we make all of this happen faster? If this is as good as you're portraying it, and I want to believe you, like, what's the bottleneck? Is it regulation? Is it engineering? Is it advertisement?
I mean, there are a lot of bottlenecks, unfortunately. So I think I would say a lot of companies and inventors and innovators of all sorts, from academics to industry. We're sort of watching around 4 or 5 companies go through this over the last 5 years, Achilles being only one of them. Another company, Paratherapeutics, if you may have heard of, was actually got FDA approval a little bit before Achilles for a cognitive behavioral therapy, first digital therapeutic, and we followed second. Now bankrupt. There is, and I feel like the economic sort of collapse of during COVID, changes in the venture ecosystem of what people are putting money into, and then watching some of the first players not succeed, even several of them have gone bankrupt, has really sort of depressed enthusiasm. I mean, I watch many exciting startups struggle to get seed rounds now, which wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. So one thing is, I feel like, you know, with the CMS codes coming on, with Japan launching our ADHD treatment, people need success stories. We're a success story, but more, you know, in terms of we hit some amazing milestones, but we don't have this distributed to millions of people yet. I think with a couple success stories, it will unlock a lot more creativity and energy. That is what I feel has really limited it. And those things that cause this delay are, there's nothing particular about digital interventions. It's all new things that challenge giant institutions face this. It just takes time. And, you know, this annoying reality of just being a little too early is probably true. And so I think that that will unlock it. I feel like the engineering is there. The need is certainly there. AI is going to play a massive role. It has done nothing yet in this field. I mean, nothing. So there's just so much opportunity. I think with people knowing that there is a business here, that you can impact people around the world, it will just unlock that. And I think that's going to happen literally by next year. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Willow. I work for a small nonprofit in the well-being space as well. And we focus on a different crisis. It's the kind of the modern crisis of meaning and purpose in life. We also address about 50 different factors of well-being. So I see your closed-loop system addressing the cognition crisis, and I just wonder, are there other factors of well-being that you plan on or think are accessible in attacking, like friendship and gratitude? Are there closed-loop ways of training these other human factors of well-being?
I would say yes, without going through the details, because so far we've never really encountered anything that didn't at least lead us to create a hypothesis about what we would do. If you understand anything about the neuroscience of friendship, of love, of connection, then you should be able to create, or at least design, an interactive experience that activates it, and then you create a closed-loop system around it to reward it, and then you're off to the races. I mean, this is what we go through again and again. We haven't done it with everything. I feel like the closest we've gotten to this is some of our work on empathy. We have a lot more plans for that. But sure, I mean, this is just, you know, this is as core to how the brain works as anything we've ever done, which is probably why it's so ancient, is that this is what the brain does. It responds to the environment, it adapts and it changes. We just have not harnessed it. I mean, imagine if anything near the investment of trillions of dollars that have gone into finding the magic brain pill has gone into creating experiences, not as alternative, but mainstream medicine. We'd just be in a totally different conversation right now. So I think that the things you're working on that don't necessarily fit in the clinical domain or the areas I discussed are just as completely amenable to this approach. All right, I think that, oh, we have one more.
Hi, I'm Bruna. Thank you for your presentation. It's really nice to know everything, how everything is going. My question is, what about other disease like Alzheimer or degenerative disease? Do you have something in mind? Do you see something for the future?
Yeah, I mean, as a neurologist, when I saw patients, I don't right now, Alzheimer's patients were largely what I saw. So, and it is an incredibly devastating condition. I don't have to describe it to this audience. Some people think like, oh, there's a pathology, there's tau and amyloid, and it's not amenable to this approach because it's different. It is not different. I mean, there is pathology, there is a certain pathway that leads to synapse loss and cell death, but the brain is plastic, and even if what you're doing is strengthening the brain so that the fortress is stronger against an invasion, that it could hold its resilience for another 3 or 4 years, it would be massive. And so we're heading in that direction. As a matter of fact, all of 5 of our studies now are in this group of individuals, older individuals called mild cognitive impairment. We call it MCI. And they don't have dementia, which is a syndrome that defines declining function until you're impaired. But they are not performing at the level that they should as an older adult in their age cohort. So this is around 20% of everyone over 60. It's actually massive. And they're nervous, and I understand why they're nervous. And this is an amazing area for us to intervene because we all are in agreement that if we are going to help any condition, it's best to do it as early as possible, right? It's better to strengthen a system than to repair it. And so we hope that by intervening at the mild cognitive impairment stage, when we've tracked all of these individuals, and we're studying thousands of individuals with almost all the interventions I talked about, we're trying with MCI to see if we could at least delay dementia. So I think that that's really good opportunity. All right?
I'm wondering if you have seen anything related to like using this as a preventative medicine, or if you've studied or thought about studying it as a preventative medicine.
Yeah, it's so great. You know, we've had all of these dreams, like all of society, for like 10 years of preventative medicine, and it makes so much sense, right? We're largely in the business of sick care, right? Healthcare is sick care, right? That's a bad, I mean, it's a good business, but it's not serving society in the ultimate way. We want to prevent people from getting sick. But these studies are there's several factors. These studies are very difficult to do. And largely because when someone is impaired, you have like a real big delta to see if you could get them out of that condition. When someone's generally healthy and you want to prevent them from being impaired, it's just logistically, scientifically, methodologically a lot more challenging. You need much larger numbers to see that you're preventing a trend of someone just declining. But so if you have an intervention that's harmful, it almost never gets used, right? Because the cost-benefit ratio doesn't work out. You're taking someone healthy and trying to prevent them from becoming unhealthy by hurting them or potentially hurting them. But with these types of treatments that have an incredible safety profile, I think that we'll finally start unlocking preventative care. So that is our hope, to do large-scale preventative trials. And you need large numbers of people involved for long periods of time. But that's where we're heading.
And I think you kind of just answered it too, but I guess, do you see any risk to using it as a preventative?
The only risk I see, I like to be transparent, like this is not perfect in lots of ways. The biggest risk is addiction and abuse, right? I love video games, I always have, but there's abuse of video games, right? It doesn't mean that you should play it all the time and never talk with anyone else, never exercise, never go on a date, right? I mean, this is a problem. And if these treatments start being used like that, they are also part of the problem. As a matter of fact, when we position our video game to the FDA as a treatment, you have to have a strategy to detect side effects and avoid them. And so when you are a patient or now a customer and get treated, let's say you're a 12-year-old being treated with Endeavor, you can only play it 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks. That's a dose. Then you get another dose and another dose. And all this is really built in to prevent overdose, which can easily happen with this treatment. So I'd say that the problem with prevention is just that it takes people away from doing other things that are really good for them, like actually being in nature. Awesome. Are we good? Oh, one more? Okay, one more.
Hi, I'm Anna. At 30 years old, I actually got diagnosed with brain cancer. So and I did proton radiation, and my insurance deemed it experimental. So I had to go through 3 different appeals, but in the end, I'm an artist, and so I learned about neuroarts and how that helps, and I was wondering if you can talk about, one, did you have any cancer patients that you worked with, and can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that. We have one cancer study we're doing with pediatric cancer survivors to use gaming to help increase sort of resilience, and a lot of our benefits are on mood, and so we have started that study. It's that study at UCSF. In terms of neuroarts, I'm not quite sure Could you describe that a little bit more?
Yes, so it's essentially like going to museums and making art, how that helps.
I see. Yeah, we borrow real-world experiences and then put them through our closed-loop design so that they're more accessible, monitorable, deliverable, approvable. But these real-world experiences are already amazing, and they already exist if they're accessible to people. So art, music, story, physical fitness, nature experience, these are meditation, these are all things that you see in our games. So there's lots of amazing, convincing evidence that these real-world experiences have benefits. We see that the technological delivery of them has some really powerful assets to change, perception and the paradigm and make them medicine. But yeah, I think there's lots of great data for that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.